Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new IDoWorkHereLady stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, "A Woman Can't Do the Job? Wanna bet?" I was the head of the maintenance department for a hotel complex. Rooms, multiple buildings, restaurant, meeting rooms, and conference center, offices, lobby, and front desk. My crew had to handle everything from minor furniture repair to HVAC, plumbing, drywall repair. If it broke, we fixed or repaired it. The busier the complex got, the more work there was for us. A guy stopped coming in, so I finally called his home and was informed by his wife that he was in jail. He'd gone into the city on Friday night, gotten drunk and into a fight, and she had had enough and left his ass sitting in jail. I felt bad the guy, but I have to get the work done, and I got the impression from his wife that this was not the first time he'd done this. I go to the office and ask for the applications for maintenance and was handed a stack of applications. The ones that looked like the person built skyscrapers single-handed I knew were a waste of my time. I selected 4 that looked promising. The first one called was no longer interested, they'd gotten a full-time position. The second, third and fourth were set up with interviews. The first applicant that came in was a 20-year-old kid, who showed up in a torn t-shirt, oversized ripped jeans, reeking of weed with his girlfriend in tow. I mean, who brings their girlfriend into the interview? The next applicant was a young African-American woman who had graduated from a trade school, with impressive education and practical skills, who wanted a chance to gain experience. The last applicant never showed. I hired the young woman, without hesitation. She showed up on time, dressed to work, with her tool pouch, and I handed out assignments and went over procedures with her, and we did her paperwork. I walked around with her for her first repairs. Our hotel would give us a list of rooms that had checked out and guests or housekeeping had listed an issue. It might be light out, a faucet dripping, or noise AC. The conference center had to replace bulbs in the overhead projector because users would leave it in when they went to lunch and the bulbs would overheat. Before entering a room that was supposed to be checked out, we had a policy that we would knock on the door. If no answer, unlock the door, open it, crack, and announce "maintenance" in case the guest had run back into the bathroom or fallen asleep. Then open the door fully and switch on all lights and get started on our work orders. The young lady was good. She learned the procedure after being showed once, got in, got to work, knew exactly what tool to use for each repair and knocked them out, and cleaned up after herself. I let her know housekeeping appreciates that if it's a big mess, call them and let them know, since the management doesn't want us for an hour doing housekeeping work. Sew a paper towel or rag under a dripping pipe, tighten the leak, and make sure it isn't leaking, and taking the paper towel gets you points with housekeeping. The girls along with housekeeping employees and didn't have to be constantly supervised and knew what she was doing. I was happy. The next day was not the same. My male crew all had their favorite centerfold inside of their locker. Since they were not visible to guests or housekeeping, I did not care. My new female mechanic did not care. However, when I walked in the next morning with my cup of coffee, the first thing I saw was all centerfolds were on the outside of the locker doors. The next day was not the same. My male crew all had their favorite centerfold inside of their locker. Since they were not visible to guests or housekeeping, I did not care. My new female mechanic did not care. However, when I walked in the next morning with my cup of coffee, the first thing I saw was all centerfolds were on the outside of the locker doors. My female mechanic arrived next, and I assured her I'd deal with this crap as soon as the idiots got in. I was not happy, and that meant they were not going to be happy either. But she asked if I'd let it slide and let her handle it. I asked what she had in mind, and I loved her plan. The guys came in snickering like schoolboys who pulled a prank, and I didn't say a thing. The next day, however, the lockers still had their centerfolds in place, only with the addition of a playgirl centerfold of a very muscular male. I had a group of 6 men ranging in age 22 to 50 whining like school kids who learned they were going to have to go to summer school. They were complaining about how disgusting that was. I let them know that if they wanted to play games, she was entitled to play as well, and suggested they grow up and do their jobs, since this woman had some skills that some of them lacked. She worked for me for 3 more years, and when she left I gave her a glowing letter of recommendation citing her technical skills, as well as her dependability. She was on time and on task without causing any drama. Once the men realized that she was that good, she taught some of the younger guys some tricks to troubleshoot our ice machines, and even the old mechanics who'd thought women couldn't this kind work eventually came to respect her skills. My daddy taught me a long time ago to listen. You might be surprised what can learn from people others don't consider having any worthwhile input. The next story is titled, Arrested Because I Do Work Here. Some parts of this posting are going to be difficult to explain for reasons that will become apparent as you read through it, and a lot of details have been left out for obvious reasons. Well, over 20 years ago now, I was working for a UK government department as part of a team that dealt with what would today be loosely called cybercrime and national security. I was not a civil servant, but I was employed jointly by the Ministry of Defence (MOD) and the Home Office (HO). It was a civilian organisation, but we were all given a military rank by the MOD corresponding to the Army rank system, and depending on how far our responsibility ran. My main job was finding things that the bad guys had tried to hide on computers and other electronic devices. Remember, this was well over 20 years ago, and things were a lot simpler in those days. Think Windows 3.1 and basic programming, and computer nerds were somewhat of a rare animal in those days. Real dinosaur days, no mobile phones even. And mobile walkie-talkies were the size, shape and weight as the average household brick. When asked, members of the team regularly went out to gather evidence at various crime scenes. We worked alongside numerous police forces throughout the UK and could be called out anywhere, from Cornwall and the Channel Islands in the south to the Outer Hebrides in the far north, all at a moment's notice. One day we got a call from the London Metropolitan Police (Met) to attend a raid on a property in North London that was to take place very early the following morning. I don't know how it happened, but I was the only member of the team available, so I got assigned to go with the Met and take possession of any computers that might be found during the raid and hold on to them for continuity reasons in case things found on said computers were ever used in court. For security reasons, I was confined to the office overnight until I was taken to the address the following morning. I was never very good at sleeping in or on an office chair, so it was not exactly a restful or comfortable night. On arrival at the address of the raid, I am the only person there not in uniform, but I do don a white coverall garment and plastic gloves and overshoes. I enter the building and am escorted to a room with a number of computers. Along with 1 or 2 Commodore and 4 or more Spectrum ZX computers. This will give you an idea of the time period if you know computer history. If not, just Google the names. There was a tower PC at the scene, something very rare in those days. The tower PC had 2 rather large hard drives. This was very rare and obviously very expensive as well, so something of interest. I was left on my own to do what it was I was there to do and took out the tools to do the job. I had just started to dismantle the tower computer when a voice from behind me shouted, "Hey you! Step away from that thing." I was a bit confused by the approach and attitude, so I shuffled round in a kneeling position and looked at what I saw was a Met Police Constable (PC) standing in the doorway. I said something to the effect that I was removing the hard drives, and he just shouted again. I said, "Step away from that thing, you are interfering with evidence." Without trying to get up, I tried to explain again what I was doing. With hindsight, I should have said who I was rather than what I was doing. Next thing I know, I am lying face down and the PC was handcuffing me and yelling for support. Didn't use the term backup in those days, hadn't seen all those US cop shows on the TV yet. So, there was I face down wearing the same white coverall suit, with the same plastic gloves and overshoes the PC had on, but I was the one wearing handcuffs and apparently under arrest. Eventually, it seemed a long time, I had never been handcuffed before, so that would have made it appear longer in my mind, but eventually, a police superintendent, Super, appeared on the scene, saw who I was and turned to face the arresting PC. He looked him up and down slowly. I shall never forget the conversation that followed. "Super, and you are PC Z123, changed for obvious reasons." "Super, and what is all the row about?" "PC, I have arrested a civilian who was impersonating a police officer and tampering with evidence, sir." "Super, and he is? What is his name? What was he doing?" "PC, don't know sir, I saw him tampering with that thing," points to tower computer. "I told him to stop and step away, but he refused, so I arrested him and handcuffed him to save the evidence." "Super, and who is he?" "PC, don't know sir. Just a civilian." "Super, well let me tell you then. That civilian is the representative of government department, and his job is to secure evidence that his department is going to examine for the Met. Furthermore, his rank outranks me. He is the equivalent of a chief superintendent. I am just a superintendent. What rank are you? And he stressed the last word, Constable. I was released by a very embarrassed PC and helped to my feet. The PC was then told to guard the door, and to stay there, not to move, and not let anyone interfere with what I was doing. I finished the job, got all the evidence bagged and tagged as you would say today. We never used that phrase back then, and left. I thanked the PC very politely as I left with all the evidence and was driven back to my office, where I logged everything and placed it in a secure holding room until I could get at least 8 hours sleep so that I would be fresh for work when I started on the hard drives and tapes I had retrieved. Yes, computers used cassette tapes for data and program storage way back then. To conclude, I found what the Met were looking for in and on the computers, the tapes and discs, plus loads of other stuff the Met did not know of before the raid. The Met charged him and a couple of others with numerous offenses under the Defense of the Realm Act. Note, our department never charged anyone with any offense. The Met had a branch dedicated to this and always took over the case when it went to court, regardless of where the offenses took place. Whenever possible, our department was never even mentioned during any trial. In fact, my boss was the first throughout the department's history to reveal that the department actually existed. She was also the first director to reveal her name to the press. Nowadays, the department even has a telephone openly available in telephone directories. But that is by the way. Anyway, the outcome was that the bad guys all got to go to trial and each got a long sentence for what was basically endangering the state, plus some extra smuggling and trafficking offenses that got taken into consideration. As a bonus, the day following the raid, I got a full 12+ hours sleep in a comfortable bed and was woken the following morning by the girlfriend, who was later to be my wife, with a kiss and the best cup of cappuccino coffee I have ever tasted. That is the story of how I got arrested for doing my job as instructed and got thrown to the ground and handcuffed despite saying to the PC at the time, "But police officer, I do work here." The next story is titled, "You Can't Do Anything. You're just a passenger like me." It was my day off and I went to my local station to travel to see a friend, fully masked obviously. I was waiting by the rear end of where the train would arrive. As it had covered seating out of the way, I heard a group of people yelling and screaming and I tried to ignore it. They continued to get louder, but one girl in particular was obviously the ringleader. After a few minutes the train arrived and we all got on. I was in the very last seat at the back of the train. The ringleader started getting aggressive to a fellow passenger for no reason and my ears pricked up. I stood up and told her to calm down, that she's being an idiot and to just let others be. That was obviously the wrong thing to do. She came close to me and started yelling at me, "What are you going to do, big man? Huh? You gonna cry to mommy? You gonna go find the police, huh?" She obviously thought she was untouchable. I said, "Look at that screen, what does it say?" Scrolling LED screen that repeats in writing what has been said over the loudspeaker. She looked at it and said, "So what? What you gonna do?" I replied to her, "Nothing, just wanted you to look directly at the CCTV camera so there is a clear shot of you." She got angry. "Oh, you think you're a big man, huh? You think you gonna get the police involved?" I pretended to think about it, then said, "You know what, that's exactly what I'm going to do." I then used the key I have on my house keychain that accesses pretty much all UK railway property and entered the rear cab, where I quickly closed the door, used the cab-to-cab communication to speak to the driver to let him know what was going on and to ask for BTP, British Transport Police, assistance. I then came out, told her that BTP were on their way and the train won't be moving until they arrive. She didn't believe me at first, but then after the train wasn't leaving the next station I could see she was getting a bit frustrated. When they did arrive eventually, I gave them my work ID and side of the story and they were all taken off. The next story is titled, "Lady Thought I Was Breaking Into Her Neighbor's House." Last summer I was house-sitting for a neighborhood lady I knew. I had to walk over there twice a day to feed her cat and let out her dog and just other general stuff. She was kinda a hoarder, so I didn't exactly hang out inside, just played with her dog in the back. On the fourth day I'm getting her mail, and her neighbor walks over and goes, "You know that's illegal." I was like, "What?" So she said, "Opening her mail, that's a crime. So is breaking into her house every day." I was mad at this point and an angsty teenager, so I said, "Shut up, I'm allowed to be here." Then I grabbed the mail, flipped her off, and walked inside. I watched out the window as she went back to her house, so I did my job, fed the cat and took the dog out in the back. That's when I hear the police car. Turns out that idiot called the police on me and told them I was breaking into her neighbor's house and she feared for her family's safety. I'm a scrawny white girl, not exactly FBI's most wanted. I went out in the front with the dog and Karen is pointing at me and screaming that I'm breaking the law, and the cop takes one look at me is like, yeah sure. He eventually got her to go to her house and get a water or something while he arrested me. I explained to him that I was house sitting, showed him my key, he believed me and told me to finish up and he'd drive me home for my safety. The guy was chill, like late 20s IG. So I put the dog up and locked the door and come back out to see Karen leaving her house, so I go down the driveway to the police car and she starts yelling at him again to arrest me. He has me get in the front seat of the car with the window rolled down while he tried to calm her down. He explains I'm house sitting and it's not illegal to bring in someone else's mail. All of a sudden she gasps and backs up and yells, "Oh my gosh, she's bribing you with sex. I'm calling the police." The cop looked completely shocked. So she dials 911 and starts yelling into the phone. Meanwhile the cop goes around to the back of the car and radios something in. About 5 minutes of her yelling later, another cop shows up and she walks over and talks to the other cop. Karen then runs over and starts yelling that I'm a prostitute and was going to kill her family. The girl cop ignored her and came over to my window and says, "Okay, I'm going to drive you home, sweetie. That all right?" I said yeah, but Karen did not like that she started yelling again, but the cop spun around and said, "Ma'am, I suggest you stop. Making frivolous 911 calls is a misdemeanor and this girl has done nothing illegal." She then had me get in her car and she drove me home. I never say the Karen lady again. Sorry, this post is long and incoherent. The next story is titled, Karen Shouts and Threatens to Drag Me Off a Locomotive. I used to work on a narrow-gauge steam railway local to me. I was training up to become a fireman, stoker if you're American I think, so I was technically a trainee cleaner at the time. It's complicated, but had a few footplate trips to learn the ropes on how to fire each locomotive. As no two engine behave the same, even if they are the same exact type of locomotive. So, the driver hopped off the footplate as we weren't due out for another 20 minutes. Leaving me and the fireman on the loco, chatting about different firing techniques. When the injector, the special bit of kit that uses steam to force water into the boiler, started making some very loud noises that it's not supposed to make. The fireman hopped out the cab to have a look at what was going on, grabbed a hammer, adjustable spanner and started tinkering away. Now, I was wearing full cover overalls and a flat cap. But due to the heat of the summer I had unzipped the top half of my overalls so my shirt was visible. It was about 30 degrees outside, which is hot for England. Also bear in mind that I'm literally stood next to a raging coal fire as well. I can't see the water level in the gauge glasses, so I open and shut the gauge valve quickly so I can see the water bounce around in the glass to see where the level is. Karen, why are you doing that? Get down from there. Me, sorry miss. Karen, you shouldn't be up there. Passengers aren't allowed on the engines, I should drag you off there myself. Me, miss, I work here. I'm a trainee. I'm supposed to be here. Karen, no you don't, you're only saying that so you can stay up there. Get down right now. Goes to grab me by the arm. Me, don't touch me. Fireman, hey Nathan, could you pass me that can of magic stuff please? Magic stuff is a nickname for a special blend of lubrication oil that many railways use as a general lube oil. Me, passes the can to him. Karen, walks off. I dare say that the fireman could hear everything that was going on. He didn't need oil to make the injector work and there's no moving parts near the cab that would need oiling. So I'm pretty sure that he only said what he did to politely shut the Karen up. The next story is titled, Supply Chain Issues Apply to Everyone. Period. So this is something I've come up against a ridiculous number of times in the last month or two. What do you mean that's out of stock? Can't you get more? I've been shopping here for forever. No. We can't. Out of stock generally means out of stock. I don't know about other companies, but at my store if we can order it for you or find it somewhere else we will tell you. It is so very frustrating to have so many people act like they honestly think we are lying to customers about being able to get product and are putting in the effort for only a select few. Had a guy come in this morning looking for an item that we've been out of for a few weeks. My coworker explained to him that we had been out of it and when asked said that no, it was not currently orderable. The guy stood there for a few minutes hemming and hawing and saying that it's such a common item, he couldn't believe we didn't have it. At this point my coworker called me over, as I'm the senior employee, and asked me, as if to clarify, that we couldn't order the product. I did a quick search and told the customer that no, we couldn't. He started almost whining that he's been a loyal customer of ours for years. Doesn't that make a difference? After a bit of back and forth he started trying to explain to me how our inventory system works and that I'm just not that familiar with it, clearly. Because he used to work for Sears and all chain stores use the same systems. And if I do this, he'll be able to get it. Would not let it go. I eventually just had to tell him he was being disruptive and bothering both staff and customers, and if he didn't stop I'd have to ask him to leave. He did not like that and tried to escalate the situation, asked for my manager, but as I'm the manager on duty today he couldn't, and eventually left after wandering the store for a good half hour muttering to himself. The next story is titled, So I Was Sitting in My Driveway. This was last September. I'm a 28Y male. So I'm sitting in my driveway waiting for my brother to pick me up. My car is in the shop, so I'm sitting where my car would be. My brother is coming to take me to get my car. I was on my phone, probably read it, and I notice a lady that lives across the street and a few houses down from me approaching me. She gets close to me and asks me what I'm doing. I'm just thinking, all right neighbor lady. I tell her I'm waiting for my brother to pick me up. She gives me a weird look and says, well, can you do that somewhere else? I'm really confused. In my confusion I just mutter, what? She stares at me and says that I can't sit in this driveway and that I need to be on my way. So I understand what's happening at this point and so say, this is my house. I live here. Now she's really confused. I continue, I own this house. This is my driveway. My car is in the shop. Cue Karen's surprised Pikachu. She starts apologizing and says she didn't recognize me and that, at least you know your neighbors will look out for you. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.